The forbidden question, polished version. 5 centuries ago, a single question echoed through the palaces of Europe. A question so dangerous it terrified kings, silenced priests, and haunted philosophers. Is it better for a ruler to be loved or feared? Most people dodge this question. They say both because it feels safe. They say love because it sounds noble. But Niccolò Machiavelli, the man whose writings were once branded the Devil's Handbook, dared to answer without hesitation. And his answer shattered illusions. If you cannot be both, it is far safer to be feared. Stop here. Imagine for a moment that you suddenly hold power, not the shallow influence of likes and follows, but real power. Power over promotions, loyalty, survival. Would you rather be surrounded by affection that can vanish overnight, or by fear that binds people to your will? Machiavelli argued that love is fragile. Love is voluntary, unstable, easily swayed by envy or self-interest. A crowd may adore you one day and desert you the next. But fear? Fear grips the human mind like chains. It does not depend on goodwill, it depends on survival. And survival is the strongest instinct of all. Yet there is a razor-thin line. Fear can protect a ruler for decades, but once it curdles into hatred, it destroys him. Hatred breeds plots. Hatred breeds rebellion. And hatred has toppled more leaders than any enemy army ever could. This is the forbidden truth most leadership gurus won't dare admit. Fear works. And it works not only in medieval kingdoms, but in boardrooms, classrooms, politics, and even in relationships. History proves it. Dictators who mastered fear without tipping into outright hatred ruled for decades. Those who went too far, crossing the line into cruelty, were ripped apart by mobs that once obeyed them. Business proves it. The CEO who desperately tries to be everyone's friend is often disrespected, ignored, or quietly undermined. But the CEO who enforces discipline, sometimes harshly, commands respect. Employees may not love him, but they know better than to defy him. Fear sharpens authority. Even relationships prove it. The partner who is too nice, endlessly accommodating, often becomes invisible, taken for granted, discarded. But the partner who inspires respect, even with a streak of coldness, commands fascination. Desire clings to those who cannot be easily controlled. So ask yourself honestly, when people think of you, do they simply like you, or do they respect you? Which matters more? Machiavelli's brilliance wasn't in inventing cruelty, it was in exposing reality. He stripped away the sugar-coating of human nature and revealed the mechanics of loyalty. And his verdict was ruthless. Loyalty bought through love is temporary. Loyalty forged in fear endures. Picture yourself as a ruler. Your army is restless. Your advisors whisper treason. Your people admire you, but envy your throne. If you lean only on their affection, you gamble with shifting sands. But if they fear betraying you, if the cost of treachery is higher than the reward, you stand secure. This isn't just theory, it is psychology in its rawest form. Think about today's politics. Why do certain leaders survive scandals that would destroy anyone else? Because their supporters may not love them unconditionally, but they fear the chaos of life without them. Think about today's influencers. Why do some dominate entire platforms? Because their boldness, even arrogance, creates an aura of power. People hesitate to challenge them because fear of humiliation outweighs the desire to rebel. Think about workplaces. The manager who rules with nothing but kindness often becomes irrelevant. The one who rules with clear consequences, punishments as well as rewards, earns obedience. Not affection, but obedience. And obedience keeps power intact. But here lies the knife's edge. Fear without hatred is strength. Fear with hatred is suicide. The dictator who slaughters indiscriminately will be overthrown. The CEO who humiliates staff will lose them in droves. The partner who crosses into cruelty will be abandoned. The real Machiavellian art is precision. To use fear strategically, not savagely. To instill just enough dread that betrayal is unthinkable while stopping short of provoking revenge. And here's the chilling part. Most of us already live under this law. At work, fear of losing your job often motivates more than love for your company. In society, fear of punishment keeps order more effectively than moral preaching. In relationships, fear of abandonment shapes behavior as much as affection does. Machiavelli didn't invent this, he only revealed it. He dared to say out loud what everyone secretly knows. Morality is fragile, fear is reliable. So let me ask you, if you had to choose today, love or fear, which would you pick? And more importantly, which do you think your rivals are using against you right now? This is the first ruthless law of Machiavelli. Those who rely only on being loved will be betrayed. Those who rule with fear, but without hatred, will endure. And this truth doesn't just belong to the past. It belongs to you. It belongs to the world you're navigating right now. So look closely at your life. Do people obey you because they adore you, or because they respect and fear crossing you? And if you don't like the answer, are you prepared to change it? Before we go deeper, hit subscribe to Ruthless Psychology. This isn't just another channel. It's a community for those who dare to look at the world not as it should be, but as it truly is. If you want to master the hidden laws of power, this is where you belong. Now, if fear is safer than love, then what about appearances? Is it enough to be powerful, or must you look powerful? Machiavelli's answer to this will disturb you even more. Behind the mask. If fear is safer than love, then what comes next? Machiavelli's answer is chilling. It is not enough to be powerful. You must look powerful. Appearances, he wrote, matter more than reality. People do not see your inner motives. They see only the performance you present, and they will judge you based on that illusion, whether or not it reflects the truth. Think about it. Do you truly know if your leaders, your bosses, your idols are virtuous, or do you only know the image they project? Machiavelli understood long before Instagram that the mask is more important than the face. A prince, he said, does not need to be merciful, honest, or just, but he must appear to be. Why? Because most people are blind to reality. They cling to appearances and they obey those who play the part convincingly. This is why rulers staged ceremonies, paraded symbols, and cloaked their actions in myths and religion. It didn't matter if the ruler secretly broke every promise. As long as he looked devout, faithful, and strong, the people believed. Take Pope Alexander VI, one of Machiavelli's examples. He swore oaths he never intended to keep. He lied with ease, but his mask of devotion made him seem trustworthy, and that illusion gave him power greater than truth ever could. The lesson is unsettling. Human beings judge with their eyes more than their hands. We believe the story, not the substance, and the one who masters appearances controls imagination itself. But here's the catch. Illusion alone is not enough. A mask without force behind it eventually cracks. A leader who pretends to be strong but cannot act decisively will collapse. A leader who looks virtuous but never enforces order will be exposed. Machiavelli insisted that image must be backed by ruthless capability. Show mercy, but only when it strengthens you. Show honesty, but only when it serves survival. Break promises if necessary, but keep the mask of virtue in place. Now pause and think about the modern world. Isn't this the game of politics? Leaders smiling for cameras, staging photo ops, kissing babies, shaking hands. Behind the curtain, deals are made, alliances are broken, promises are shredded, but the mask must remain flawless. Isn't this the game of business? Companies polish their brands with slogans about integrity and sustainability. Behind closed doors, layoffs happen, corners are cut and profits are maximized, but to the world, they must appear noble. And isn't this the game of social media? Influencers post perfect vacations, flawless bodies, carefully staged lifestyles. Behind the scenes, debt, anxiety, broken relationships, but the mask, the brand, matters more than reality because people follow the performance, not the truth. So here is Machiavelli's second ruthless law: the world obeys appearances more than reality. Ask yourself, what mask are you wearing? Do people see you as confident, decisive, untouchable, or do they see hesitation, weakness, insecurity? Which story are you feeding into their imagination? Because in the contest of power, the mask often becomes the battlefield itself, and whoever controls the illusion controls the outcome. But let's sharpen this further. If fear is safer than love and appearances matter more than reality, then the most dangerous leaders are those who can wield both, those who instill fear behind the curtain while presenting the mask of kindness, piety, or justice in public. Cesare Borgia understood this well. When one of his governors became hated for excessive cruelty, Borgia staged a public execution. He killed the governor not because he cared about justice, but because he wanted to appear merciful. Behind the curtain, he was ruthless. In front of the people, he was benevolent. The mask gave him admiration. The fear kept him secure. Do you see the genius? This is the art of duality, to be ruthless in private and radiant in public, to terrify your enemies while seducing the crowd. Modern parallels are everywhere. Politicians who crush opponents behind the scenes but smile on stage. CEOs who fire thousands but appear in glossy interviews about company culture. Influencers who battle depression in private but project endless joy to millions. The mask is not just important, it is survival. And those who underestimate it lose. So let me ask you, what illusion do you want others to believe about you? Are you shaping it, or is it shaping you? Machiavelli's lesson cuts deep. People don't need to know who you really are. They only need to believe the story you tell. And the stronger the illusion, the less anyone dares to question it. Imagine you are negotiating a deal. You have nothing, no leverage, no resources. But if you appear confident, if you appear unshakable, your opponent may fold. The mask wins the battle before the fight begins. Now ask yourself, how many times have you lost simply because you looked weak? The mask is not deception for its own sake. It is strategy. Strategy that decides whether you are respected or ignored. And here is the most ruthless twist. Over time, the mask becomes the truth. The story you repeat is the one people believe, and once enough people believe it, reality bends to the illusion. This is why Machiavelli said a ruler must never reveal his true self. Power is not about authenticity, it is about control. So reflect on this. Are you projecting the image of power? Or are you surrendering to someone else's performance? Because in Machiavelli's world, and in ours, image is not decoration. Image is destiny. Subscribe to Ruthless Psychology if you haven't already. Here, we strip away illusions, not to destroy them, but to use them, because once you see the mask for what it is, you can choose to wear it, or to weaponize it. But illusion and fear are not the only weapons in the arsenal of power. Sometimes cruelty itself must be used, not the mindless kind, but a precise surgical cruelty that cuts once and scars forever. That is Machiavelli's next lesson, and it is darker still. The price of ruthlessness. So far, we've seen that fear is safer than love, and appearances outweigh reality. But what happens when neither illusion nor fear is enough? When order begins to collapse, enemies multiply, and decisive action is unavoidable. Machiavelli's answer is ruthless. Sometimes cruelty is not only necessary, but merciful, if it is used correctly. At first, this sounds shocking. How can cruelty ever be merciful? But Machiavelli defined cruelty differently from how we use the word today. To him, cruelty was not about sadism or mindless bloodshed. It was about the courage to make painful decisions, decisively, swiftly, and with purpose, so that society can heal rather than bleed endlessly. Consider his example of Cesare Borgia. When one of Borgia's governors became despised for excessive brutality, chaos spread. Did Borgia apologize? Did he beg forgiveness? Number. He staged a public execution of that governor. The people saw justice. Borgia appeared merciful, but behind the curtain he had eliminated a liability while strengthening his own grip on power. One act of cruelty prevented months of rebellion. This is the Machiavellian paradox. Cruelty, when well used, can create stability. But cruelty, when dragged out, multiplies hatred. Think of a modern CEO. Imagine a company in crisis. Salaries can't be sustained. The weak leader delays layoffs, hoping to spare feelings. Week after week, rumors spread, anxiety festers, productivity collapses. When the cuts finally come, the resentment is deep, the hatred permanent. But a strong leader? He makes the cuts all at once, sharp, decisive, and final. Painful, yes. But within weeks, the company stabilizes, the survivors rebuild, the wound heals faster. One ruthless strike is often more humane than 1,000 small cuts. This principle applies everywhere. A manager who ignores discipline problems allows chaos to grow. But one who intervenes early, firmly, and visibly restores order. A politician who dithers during crisis invites panic. One who takes decisive, even harsh action often earns lasting respect. The truth Machiavelli exposed is this: people can forgive a single sharp cruelty, but they will never forgive endless uncertainty. And here's where the lesson cuts even deeper. Cruelty is not only about action, it is about timing. Too early and you look unjust. Too late and you look weak. The art is in striking exactly when the moment demands it and never hesitating once the decision is made. History is full of leaders who failed this test. Roman emperors who wavered only to be assassinated by their own guards. Politicians who tried to compromise endlessly and were devoured by rivals. CEOs who lacked the courage to make hard calls and watched their companies crumble. But it's also full of those who mastered it, leaders who struck once, cleanly, and then rebuilt. Their reputations endured because people respect decisiveness, even when they fear it. Now, let's bring it closer to home. Have you ever dragged out a breakup, terrified of hurting the other person, only to make the pain worse for both of you? Have you ever avoided firing an incompetent employee, only to watch the whole team suffer? Have you ever postponed a confrontation, only to find the conflict spiraling out of control? That hesitation, that avoidance, is what Machiavelli warned against. Ruthlessness, when well-timed, is often kinder than endless hesitation. Would you rather endure one deep wound that scars and heals, or suffer 1,000 shallow cuts that never stop bleeding? That is the true price of cowardice in leadership. But cruelty alone is not enough. Machiavelli warned that leaders must never rely solely on force. In his time, he condemned princes who depended on mercenaries, hired soldiers with no loyalty. They would fight for money, not for you, and abandon you at the first opportunity. The modern equivalent? Leaders who rely too heavily on outsiders, consultants, contractors, temporary alliances. Yes, they can serve a purpose, but if the core of your power rests in their hands, you are weak. True strength comes from within, from loyal teams, disciplined followers, allies who share your mission. Outsiders may supplement your power, but they should never form its backbone. And then there are advisors. Machiavelli was clear: listen to counsel, but never surrender judgment. A ruler surrounded by flatterers is doomed. But a ruler who invites honest counsel while keeping final authority makes sharper decisions. Think of modern leaders who fail here. Executives insulated by yes men, blind to looming crises. Politicians who let their advisors run the show, becoming puppets. On the other hand, those who demand truth but retain control are rarely surprised and rarely defeated. So let's distill Machiavelli's third ruthless law. Cruelty, when well used, stabilizes. Cruelty without control destroys. Build strength from within, act decisively when necessary, and never hand your judgment to others. This lesson is as relevant now as it was in Renaissance Italy. Whether you are running a business, leading a movement, or navigating personal relationships, the principle remains. Avoid endless hesitation. Strike once. Rebuild. Move forward. Because here's the reality Machiavelli forces us to face. Leadership is not about avoiding pain. It is about deciding when pain must be inflicted and making sure it serves a greater purpose. So ask yourself, what pain are you postponing? What wound are you too afraid to inflict? And how much more chaos will grow if you keep waiting? Subscribe to Ruthless Psychology if this lesson hit you. Because here, we don't run from harsh truths, we weaponize them. If you've ever hesitated when you should have struck, know this: Machiavelli would call that weakness. And in the game of power, weakness is fatal. But cruelty and decisiveness are only part of the equation. Even the strongest ruler cannot escape the tides of fortune. The river of chaos always rises, and when it floods, only those prepared, only those adaptable, can survive. That is Machiavelli's next lesson: fortune, boldness, and betrayal. Fortune, boldness, and betrayal. No matter how powerful a ruler may appear, there is always one force waiting to shatter them: fortune. Machiavelli compared fortune to a raging river, calm and gentle at times, but when it floods, it sweeps away bridges, cities, and even empires. Weak rulers are washed away when the waters rise. But strong rulers, they are the ones who build dams, channels, and barriers long before the flood comes. In other words, you cannot control fortune, but you can prepare for it. To Machiavelli, this preparation required virtù, not virtue in the moral sense, but boldness, skill, and the willpower to bend circumstances to your advantage. Virtù is the power to seize opportunity when it appears and to adapt when fortune changes. The balance is subtle. Fortune favors the bold, but punishes the reckless. To wait endlessly for the perfect moment is weakness, but to leap blindly without calculation is suicide. The true master is the one who recognizes when the current shifts and strikes decisively, adjusting tactics as the waters rise. Look at history. States that failed to modernize their armies or economies collapsed under rivals who embraced change. Monarchs who clung to outdated methods were overthrown. Companies that ignored innovation, think of giants once dominant in their industries, were swept away by competitors who dared to adapt. Fortune rewards those who evolve. When the storm hits, do you drift helplessly or do you ride the current? The difference between survival and ruin often comes down to how fast you can adapt. Machiavelli illustrated this with the life of Cesare Borgia, the man he admired as the perfect prince. Borgia rose through fortune. His father was Pope Alexander VI, and with the Pope's backing, he carved out a state through cunning diplomacy and calculated violence. He placed loyal men in power, eliminated rivals, and used fear to impose order. For a time, he was unstoppable. But then, fortune shifted. His father, the Pope, died. Borgia fell ill. Enemies circled. His empire collapsed almost overnight. Machiavelli concluded that Borgia had nearly mastered the art of power, but failed to prepare for the flood. He had relied too heavily on his father's fortune and not enough on building defenses for when that fortune vanished. The lesson is timeless. If your power depends entirely on luck, inheritance, or borrowed strength, it will vanish when fortune turns. True power is built on foundations that endure even when the river floods. Now consider Machiavelli's own life. He rose as a diplomat in Florence, negotiating with kings, popes, and mercenary generals. He witnessed betrayal, shifting alliances, wars fought and lost in a single season. For over a decade, he held influence. Then, fortune turned. The Medici family regained control of Florence. Machiavelli was accused of conspiracy, arrested, tortured, and exiled. Stripped of his position, he retreated to his farm, disgraced and desperate. But instead of surrendering, he turned his misfortune into legacy. In exile, he wrote The Prince. He dedicated it to the very rulers who had cast him aside, hoping his insights would restore him to favor. The book was ignored at first, even condemned. But centuries later, it became one of the most influential works ever written on politics. Think about that. The same man who had been tortured and discarded by fortune ended up shaping the way power is studied forever. He lost his office, but by adapting, by writing, the man ensured his ideas would outlive his enemies. That is the essence of virtue, to take the chaos fortune throws at you and transform it into lasting strength. And the same principle applies to you. Fortune will always change. Opportunities vanish, markets collapse, relationships break, health fails, betrayals strike. The question is not if, but when. And when it happens, will you drown or will you adapt? Modern parallels are everywhere. Startups that pivot when markets shift, survive, and grow. Those that cling to failing models collapse. Athletes who reinvent themselves when their bodies age continue their careers. Those who don't fade into obscurity. Leaders who adjust strategies to new realities endure, while those who cling to the past are swept aside. Fortune rewards boldness, but boldness without foresight is recklessness. This is why Machiavelli's fourth ruthless law is this: fortune cannot be controlled, but it can be prepared for. Boldness must be balanced with adaptability. The one who anticipates the flood will survive the storm. Think of your own life. What part of your power, influence, or success depends purely on fortune? And if that fortune disappeared tomorrow, would you be ready? Machiavelli challenges us to face an uncomfortable truth. No reign, no empire, no relationship, no power is permanent. Fortune always shifts. The ones who survive are those who build defenses before the water rises. But fortune is not the only enemy. Human betrayal is even more treacherous. Allies turn into rivals, friends into enemies, followers into traitors. And betrayal, Machiavelli knew, is the most devastating weapon in the struggle for power. That is why he dedicated his most ruthless insights to betrayal. How to survive it, how to prevent it, and even how to use it as a weapon. And that brings us to the final part of our journey: Machiavelli's legacy and his most haunting question. The Machiavellian legacy. For centuries, the prince was banned, burned, and branded heretical. Priests warned that it was the devil's handbook. Kings denounced it in public while studying it in secret. Generals, CEOs, and revolutionaries alike whispered its lessons, knowing they contained a kind of forbidden power. Why? Because Machiavelli tore away illusions. He refused to flatter human nature. He refused to promise justice or morality. Instead, he gave leaders what they needed most: a survival manual for the ruthless game of power. But here's the most unsettling truth of all. His insights didn't die with the Renaissance. They are alive today in politics, in business, in social life, even in relationships. Think about betrayal. Machiavelli understood it as the inevitable shadow of power. The more influence you hold, the more rivals will plot against you. Friends can become traitors overnight. Supporters can turn into enemies the moment fortune shifts. And yet, betrayal itself can be weaponized. He warned rulers never to rely solely on loyalty. Loyalty is fragile, like love, fear, Appearances, decisive action, adaptability. These are the true foundations of stability. And when betrayal comes, the wise ruler uses it. He turns traitors into examples. He transforms plots into opportunities to strengthen his own image. Every rebellion crushed is a performance that magnifies his authority. We see the same thing today. Politicians survive scandals by turning accusations into proof of persecution, rallying their base even stronger. CEOs use betrayals to justify reshaping their companies, firing rivals, and consolidating control. Even in personal life, betrayals often force reinvention. Those who use the pain as fuel become stronger than they were before. When someone betrays you, do you crumble, or do you rise by using their betrayal as proof of your strength? This is why Machiavelli's reputation is so complicated. People call him evil, manipulative, ruthless. But he never glorified cruelty for its own sake. He described the world as it is, not as we wish it to be. He stripped power of its illusions and forced us to see its mechanics in raw, brutal clarity. And that clarity is why his name became an adjective, Machiavellian. It means cunning, strategic, manipulative, but perhaps the true meaning is simpler. It means realistic. Because ask yourself, what is more dangerous? To live in comforting illusions that collapse the moment reality strikes, or to see the world as it truly is, with all its treachery, greed, and hunger for power? Machiavelli chose clarity over comfort, and that choice is what made his ideas endure. His final challenge still echoes across centuries. If the crown were placed in your hands, would you choose morality or power? Most will say morality because it sounds noble. But when survival is on the line, when betrayal closes in, when fortune turns, when enemies rise, morality often collapses. Power, on the other hand, endures for those ruthless enough to wield it. This doesn't mean abandoning all ethics. It means understanding that morality, like love, is fragile. It means recognizing that appearances matter more than sincerity, that fear is safer than affection, that cruelty, when well used, can be more merciful than hesitation, and that fortune always demands preparation. These are not comfortable lessons, but they are timeless ones. Now, reflect on yourself. In your career, do you rely on being liked or on being respected? In your relationships, do you seek approval or do you command loyalty? In your ambitions, are you waiting for fortune to smile or are you preparing for the storm? The truth is, every one of us is playing the game of power, whether we admit it or not, and those who refuse to learn the rules are doomed to be controlled by those who have. Subscribe to Ruthless Psychology if you haven't already, because here we don't run from these truths. We confront them, we study them, and we use them. This channel is for those who dare to master the hidden rules of influence, manipulation, and control. Drop a comment below. Would you rather be loved or feared? And more importantly, do you think Machiavelli was right, or was he too ruthless? Share this video with someone who still believes the world is gentle, because knowledge, like power, is meant to spread. And remember, illusions fade, fortune shifts, betrayal strikes, but those who understand Machiavelli's laws do not fall when the flood comes. They bend it to their will. So the question is no longer about Machiavelli. The question is about you. When the crown is placed in your hands, what will you choose?